Welcome to ILTV's Israel Daily. I'm Aaron Porras, and coming up in today's newscast, virus cases continue on their downwards trend as various new treatment initiatives pop up across the country. Meanwhile, the government unveils tentative exit plans to go back to normal life one step at a time. And finally, attacked from above and now from below, residents of Israel's Petah Tikvah are now battling the coronavirus as well as an insect infestation. As usual, we begin today with the latest coronavirus updates. Numbers spiking in Israel again overnight, but overall trending downwards as the lockdowns continue. Nittany Manson reporting.
Looks like things are turning a corner in Israel. 22,777 coronavirus tests conducted overnight Monday, and just under 2,000 of them reportedly coming back positive. And while that means that the infection rate is now standing at 7.7%, slightly higher than on Sunday, the overall downward trend of infections appears to be continuing, with the infection rate just last week being nearly 14%. But still, the numbers in general remain high, confirmed active cases in the country now rising to 51,855, 837 in serious condition, and the death toll reaching 1,993. The vast majority of infections continuing to come from the ultra-Orthodox neighborhood, the Haredi public divided on whether to abide by or ignore the health ministry's regulations. And meanwhile, Israel's medical defenses are staying sharp. The ministers of Health and Defense, Yuli Edelstein and Benny Gantz, inaugurating a new military coronavirus ward in cooperation with the Rambam Hospital in Haifa.
אנחנו מתחילים ביום ראשון הקרוב לטפל במחלקת קורונה צבאית. המטרה של המבצע בעצם לעזור למדינת ישראל בהתמודדות עם מחלת הקורונה. אנחנו בעצם מייצרים עוד מקומות אשפוז, בזכות הדבר הזה מדינת ישראל תהיה יותר מוכנה להמשך.
These so-called Keter wards mark the first time that the IDF will be providing aid to the general civilian population, and roughly 100 IDF medical personnel are participating.
In other news, while the IDF and the hospital networks work feverishly to contain the coronavirus pandemic's second wave, a widespread group of health-working volunteers has also now been uncovered operating in the ultra-Orthodox sector. Why uncovered? Well, because it turns out that this network has been working in secret and without the approval or even knowledge of Israeli authorities. According to Israeli media, the initiative began as a way for anti-Zionist Haredi groups to avoid using the national system. But as the virus wreaked havoc across the ultra-Orthodox sector, the service has expanded just to help with hospital overflow. Program organizers saying that the general population should create their own similar programs. The network itself, however, has its own limitations, with massive needs for equipment and staff, along with at least 170 patients supposedly in serious condition, meaning that Israel's actual number of serious coronavirus patients may be actually closer to 1,000. Now, speaking of special responses in the fight against coronavirus, a large but often overlooked sector of the public is now getting the attention it deserves. Psychiatric patients with both minor and severe conditions who are at high risk for infection, yet have added difficulty receiving treatments from general population medical wards. Chief psychiatrist with the Sheba Medical Center, Professor Mark Weiser, has more. Now, Professor, first off, what do you make of the latest drop in infection numbers? And how does that play into the work that you're doing with psychiatric patients?
We are very encouraged by the drop in numbers of patients infected by COVID-19 in the Israeli population, and we assume that this will reflect on the number of people with psychiatric illnesses who will be infected by COVID-19. Many of our patients have difficulties with the quarantine process and being alone, and patients who have a tendency towards anxiety and depression can often respond to this with great difficulty. Clearly, it's difficult for all of us to be locked in at home and not to go out and not do things, but patients with less severe psychiatric disorders, depression, anxiety, they can actually get much worse as a result of this lockdown. Paradoxically, patients with severe psychiatric disorders, patients who are chronically psychotic, patients with schizophrenia, will often will not be very active socially to begin with, hence might be less affected by the extended lockdown.
Well, but so have you seen any changes then in terms of the number of patients being admitted?
In the first wave, there was a drastic decrease in occupancy levels. In this second, much more severe wave, we're also seeing a decrease in occupancy levels, perhaps a bit less severe. We understand that in the first wave, patients, first of all, the population overall was much more concerned. People were very concerned about coming into the hospital. Today, patients are less concerned about coming into the hospital and are more likely, if they need psychiatric treatment, to come in and get treated and not to stay away, so that we are seeing decreases in occupancy levels, but to a lesser degree than we saw in the first wave.
So what have you been doing to address the challenges of this particular demographic?
In the first wave, we established the first ward in the country and probably one of the first wards in the world which treated psychiatric patients who were positive for COVID. This was done and is still being done because we are very concerned that psychiatric patients will have difficulty being with social distancing, difficulty understanding the rules that have to be adhered to in order to curtail COVID-19, hygiene, masks, social distancing, etc. And our fear was and still is that one infected patient will be admitted to a psychiatric ward and will then infect everybody else. And there were horror scenes of this sort described in the beginning of the corona crisis, both in South Korea and in China. For that reason, in February and early March, we opened the first ward in Israel, which hospitalized all of the psychiatric patients who need psychiatric hospitalization, who are positive for corona. We took them from all over the country in order for them for the patients in the other psychiatric hospitals not to be exposed to COVID-19. And in fact, this effort has been successful. There have not been mass infections in psychiatric wards, as, for example, did happen in geriatric wards and in old age homes.
And so what about the second wave? Because you said earlier that more patients are being admitted or are admitting themselves this time around. So how is Sheba evolving with the additional number of infected psychiatric patients?
These patients pose a special challenge to medicine because on the one hand, they cannot be kept in a psychiatric ward because they have medical complications of COVID. On the other hand, they are sent to corona units in general hospitals where their psychiatric symptoms pose a great challenge to the staff and to other patients who are not used to treating patients with psychiatric symptoms. We in Sheba are proud to be in advanced stages of planning of a unit which will treat patients who need psychiatric hospitalization but have mild to moderate symptoms of the coronavirus. We are putting together a special ward which on the one hand has psychiatric facilities, but on the other hand has general medical facilities. Patients will need oxygen, they will need suction, they will need definite care from internal medicine specialists with whom we are, of course, have an ongoing dialogue because we treat patients with significant medical comorbidities together with their psychiatric comorbidities. This is going to be a major challenge. These patients are going to have both psychiatric symptomatology together with respiratory symptomatology. This will be quite a challenge, but we are happy to stand up to this challenge here at the Sheba Medical Center.
All right, Professor Mark Weiser, thank you so much for being with us. Now, moving on, the lockdowns are set to continue, but there is a light at the end of the tunnel. Nittany Manson with the story.
Israel's coronavirus cabinet set to meet today to discuss the latest potential steps in the country's exit from full closures. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu telling the public that there are preliminary signs of success in the response against the coronavirus, but that more time will be needed to evaluate just how successful we've been.
אני יודע שהסגר הוא קשה לכולנו, אבל אני בטוח שרוב הציבור מבין היום שההחלטה שהובלתי על סגר הייתה הכרחית. היא הצילה אותנו מעלייה גיאומטרית של תחלואה, של תמותה, של חולים קשים, ועדיין מוקדם מדי לברך על המוגמר.
That said, Netanyahu has laid out a couple of initial steps.
אנחנו נפתח את העסקים לעסקים של 10 אנשים שלא מקבלים קהל, נפתח גם את הגיל הרך, אבל נעשה את זה בשלבים אחרים בהדרגה, בזהירות ועם מדדים ברורים למעבר משלב לשלב. אני מבקש את המשך שיתוף הפעולה שלכם, כי נצליח רק אם נפעל יחד. בשעה שהתחלואה באירופה מזנקת, אצלנו היא יורדת. בשעה שאירופה עם ערים שלמות בגודל של מדינת ישראל נכנסת לסגר, אנחנו יוצאים מהסגר. אם נפעל נכון, ננצח את המחלה. אני מבקש את שיתוף הפעולה של כל אחד ואחת מכם. תודה לכם.
So, what needs to happen for this initial economic opening? Well, this first of 8 stages in the plan is set to take effect Sunday, October 18th, on the condition that the new number of daily cases drops below 2,000. But if we can hit the target as predicted, preschools might reopen, in addition to businesses that do not receive customers. The limit on traveling beyond 1 kilometer may also be lifted, in addition to the restrictions against protesting, meeting non-nuclear family members, going to the beach, and international flights. Then, if we can get to 1,000 cases per day by November 1st, we can enter the second stage of the exit, including reopening schools for grades 1 through 4, and reopening synagogues and elective medical procedures. Unfortunately for us, though, health ministry officials predict that the final 7th and 8th stages of that exit may not come at all until the pandemic is defeated.
On to politics now. The fragile Israeli unity government is rife with internal divisions, but there's perhaps no greater casualty of the conflict than Israel's economic response to coronavirus. Ministry of Finance Director General Keren Turner-Ayal now quitting after just 5 months in the position, making her the latest in a series of high-level resignations within the finance ministry. The head of the ministry's budgets department, Shaul Meridor, as well as the accountant general, Roni Ezkiyahu, have also now recently resigned, accusing finance minister Israel Katz of stifling debate and dissent against Prime Minister Netanyahu for political reasons. Still, Turner-Ayal leaves her post saying that she's convinced Minister Katz will lead a wide-ranging plan for handling the economic crisis left over by the pandemic. Well, to that end, Katz is now promising to deliver his ministry's long-awaited budget proposal for 2021 by December. And just in time, as Health Minister Yuli Edelstein is pushing for full compensation for businesses and workers hit hardest by the lockdowns, while an alliance of over 400 retail chains and 1,800 other businesses is promising to just simply ignore the lockdown measures in greener cities starting October 18. And now with more on Israel's current political turmoil, we're joined by Knesset member from the Likud party, Mai Ganon, at the opening from the Knesset's winter session in Jerusalem. Mai, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you.
All right, so Mai, the winter session, as I said, is just now beginning. Are we going to make it to the spring, given all the divisions and the conflict internally within the coalition?
Well, I know it might be hard to believe because we're already, trying to go through everything that's been going on. It's really a storm of a government. There's no doubt about it. But I really, really hope we will be able to go through it, because I think taking the public to a 4th elections in such a short amount of time will actually be devastating for the Israeli public, especially in such a huge crisis with the coronavirus. I really, really hope so, that the people inside of the coalition will stop to continue as an opposition, will take responsibility, and will try to understand that this is not time for small politics, for demagogue, and for behavior that really puts the entire public in real danger. It's time that everyone will take responsibility and understand that we have to work for the people and put everything else aside. And unfortunately, I am not sure it's going to happen. And I'm saying it with a very, ache in my heart because I know it's such a crucial time for the future of the state of Israel. But unfortunately, there are people who are only thinking about themselves and their seat and their future in politics and not about the public of Israel.
So I want to talk about, the possibility of falling back to elections, because one of the things that might actually push us there is the failure to pass a budget, which has been a continuous issue. So let's talk about the finance ministry. What's going on with all the resignations that are going on in the finance ministry right now, and how will they affect Minister Katz's plan to deliver the 2021 budget by December?
Well, I can tell you that we have a very good finance minister and a very good prime minister who has done everything in his power, I think more than every other prime minister during the last decade, to bring the Israeli economy to such a strong point that is a very strong economy that is dealing with everything that's been happening right now. Let's remember that if we didn't have a strong economy, it wouldn't be able to survive everything that we're enduring so far. But the budget is going to be ready. It's going to happen. No one is trying to not push a budget. But let's remember that a budget for a whole year can't be prepared in such a short amount of time. And I know people think that it has to do something with politics and elections, but let me assure you that everything that the Prime Minister Netanyahu has been doing from morning till night is worrying and taking care about the economic state of the people of Israel and the health state of the people of Israel. No one is trying to do anything else. All the other headlines and, populist speeches that people from blue and white, unfortunately, are saying are, I think, because of what we're seeing in the polls, and they're scared about the next elections. But I can assure you that everything that the ministers and the members of the Knesset, like me, are doing all day, are being in the committees, being in the Knesset, and worry about every little detail, so that the residents of the state of Israel and the people of Israel will be able to go through everything that we're going through with a calm mind and not in a scare for their economic future.
All right, Knesset member Mai Ganon, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
In other news, get out your passports and start planning your next trip, because Israeli airspace will now be used by a multitude of Arab countries, including Iraq, Qatar, and Saudi Arabia, as part of a new aviation agreement between Israel and Jordan. Jerusalem and Amman late last week signed a deal to open more flight paths over both countries and to shorten flight times between Gulf states, the Far East, Asia, Europe, and North America. And the deal is expected to cut fuel costs and polluting emissions, as well as include flights departing from Iraq, Qatar, the UAE, and Saudi Arabia. There's even one path over Iran that would be used by flights taking off from China. Now, coronavirus may be the hottest topic right now, attacking our society through the air, but another threat is rearing its head, and it's coming from below. I'm talking, of course, about the Coptotermes formosanus, or the Formosan subterranean termite, the most dangerous of the 10 termite species known to Israel. And whole colonies of these little monsters have just been discovered in Petah Tikvah's Kfar Avram neighborhood. But so how bad is it? Well, here to answer is head of the Pesticides and Pest Control Division within the Ministry of Environmental Protection, Dr. Gal Zagron. Gal, thank you so much for being with us.
Hi, Aaron.
So, all right, what's so crazy about this termite? How does it compare to the average termite that you might find in Israel?
Well, it got the name super termite, so for a good reason. It has a very big population size and a great foraging range, and also really wonderful reproductive abilities.
Well, yeah.
So that's why it's considered.
Yeah, I understand that it digs 100 meters into the soil and eats through 400 grams of wood per day and endangers the railroads and insulation panels and plastic and asphalt. What kind of dangers are we, what are we looking at here with this infestation?
So they're not really dangerous for our health, but they can really destroy our property. And in Israel, we don't build much with wood, so it won't be as destructive as in countries that build in wood, but it still can be a very economical problem for houses in infested areas. And really, they are very successful species. They can produce over 70,000 reproductive units. which is far greater than other subterranean termites. And also what's special about them is that they don't just nest in the ground. They also create nests in like satellite nests in wood or in structures. So you can have the termite penetrate your building and then create a nest in your wall. And even if you destroy one nest, you can have other nests. So it's...
Oh, no. All right, so how common is this termite in Israel? Is this super termite in Israel?
Well, you know, we've been warned that it can penetrate Israel and that it would be a catastrophe because we have a really good climate for it. It likes the heat and the humidity, and we're good at that. So, it's very difficult to control what's coming inside the country, and it can come in furnitures, in boats, in wood. Also, what's really great about the Formosan termite is that it can attack not just dead wood, but also live wood. So it can attack trees.
So the forests. Wow.
It's not selective in its feeding habit.
All right, so what's being done? I understand that there's maybe an app to help track at least, or you know, tell us more about this.
Yeah, well, the minute we've recognized it as the Formosan subterranean termite, which we're collaborating with the Ministry of Health Entomology Lab. The second we got the results, we got the species from a pest management operator named Tomer Lu that suspected that he found an invasive species and also sent it to the University of Florida. And we took a sample from him, and once we've recognized that it is the super termite, then we immediately alerted the city of Petah Tikvah. We had an emergency meeting with the mayor, and they were really, they're really on board and trying very hard to fight this alongside with us and other ministries and professionals. We've done a concentrated effort to spread monitoring stations in the neighborhood where we got the info that it's there. And we also alerted the media, which was very helpful because people approached us and the local authority and told us that they have termite problems. And we came to their houses and we checked the termites. Some places had normal local termites and others really had the Formosan termite. And we've located about 5 locations. You can see that in the map.
All right. Well, it sounds like we have a lot of work on our hands to get rid of these super termites, or at least to battle against them. Dr. Ganon, thank you so much for being with us today.
You're welcome. And
now for the most calming way to end any broadcast, a pod of 15 dolphins has just been spotted off the coast of Ashkelon in southern Israel. Footage like that. My only question is, how did they get it? Did they put like a GoPro on a dolphin at some point, or is it a drone, or maybe just a really fast scuba diver? I want to know. But with that, let's take a look now at the weather forecast. Tonight should be warm and clear with lows averaging 68 degrees Fahrenheit or 20 degrees Celsius. Then tomorrow will be clear and sunny again with highs of about 87 Fahrenheit or 31 degrees Celsius. And now, before we go, let's take a look at what's going viral in Israel. And of course, it's another daily dog at ILTV. Love it. Oh, he's practicing. He wants to be part of the group. All right, that's it for today's news. Today's exchange rate is 3.39 shekels to the American dollar and 2.58 shekels to the Canadian dollar. For more news from ILTV, please like ILTV on Facebook, follow us on Instagram, and subscribe to our YouTube and Roku TV pages. I'm Aaron Porras. Thank you so much for watching.